Good morning, everyone. Pastor Owens here. Another daily devotional today. We're going to get into the word of the Lord. Matthew 15:8. This people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth and honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And he's quoting Isaiah. Isaiah prophesied that too. God spoke to Isaiah, and those words were penned. So basically, the Lord is saying here, he is talking about a group of people in Israel, mainly at that time, who was saying the right things, but their heart wasn't in it. You know, if you ever take an assessment of yourself when you're sitting at church, you're singing the songs of praising to the Lord, and yet your mind is totally somewhere else. It's possible to learn motions and be disconnected. You know, they teach your body what they call muscle memory. And I've dealt with that before in different things. They have muscle memory. You can do things that just come natural. And that's how it is. You can get caught up in the routine of just going to church and worshiping the Lord. And the lifting of the hands, the lifting of the voice, the praising God, closing the eyes. It can become a muscle memory, but the heart can be detached. And that's what the Lord was saying here in Matthew 18 and quoting Isaiah. Their heart is nigh me, or their lips are nigh me, but their heart is far from me. They go through the motions. They say the right things, but their heart is not full of passion. And that's what I want to talk about a couple minutes this morning is passion or a pastime. Is living for God a passion? Or is it just a good pastime? There's some people, and I dare say a lot of people that are just going through the motions today. Church is a pastime. Their conscience knows they need to go. Something in their soul tells them eternity is for real. They need to go. They have some kind of knowledge of God. They have a good nature about them. They believe in right and wrong and think right is the best way. And it's possible to do all that, but living for God not be a passion. Is it a passion or is it just a good pastime? That's something I want us to ask today. It's just something we do. You know, it's something we do. We know we're supposed to do it. It's a good idea to go. Back in the days, I listened to a lot of old-time radio. I have an app, I have an XM, and I like to listen to some of the old stuff they played on the radio back in the days. And I'm amazed that in those days, on the radio shows there, they would encourage you to go to church. They would tell you to take your family to church. You know, we're talking back in the 50s and the 60s, 30s, 40s even. And they're encouraging people to go to church and how it provides, and they go, how it makes a better community. And boy, you wouldn't hear that today. You would not hear that today. I don't know any radio station other than, I guess, a gospel radio station. But no, this was just regular radio. They would encourage you to go to church because, they realized back then that it made for good, wholesome living. And so it's possible to go to church. It's possible to be a good person. But God's looking for somebody that's on fire. Is it a passion? Are you ate up with living for God? Do you love him with all your heart? He told the church in the book of Revelation, he said, I would that thou wert hot or cold, but because you're lukewarm, I will spew thee out of my mouth. He said, you're going through the motions. But he said, your heart's not on fire. Your heart's not on fire. You're not full of passion. I would you were cold or hot. If you was cold, at least there would be hope for reaching for you. You would know you was cold. If you was hot, that would be the best idea. But because you're lukewarm, in other words, you're hot and cold. You're a mixture. In and out, up and down. Living for God one day, out the next. And so there's the difference. And that's what he was saying. I want your heart to be full of passion. So that's the question to ask yourself today. Is living for God a passion or is it a pastime? Is it something you do because you love God with all your heart, or is it just something you do because, it's a good thing and your conscience tells you need to do it? Nobody in their right mind want to be lost and be separated from God in hell for eternity. So it's easy to get caught up in the culture of religion. And culture is not a bad thing, God's culture. Taking on the nature of God's church, living like God's people, trying to be one of God's, the culture of the church, of the true church. I'm not talking about the worldly church, but the culture of the church, the one that's based on the Bible, is a good thing. But it has to get deeper in culture. See, that's what the Jews do, even right now. They're more proud of the fact they're a Jew than serving God. Don't think Jews are religious people. I'm sure there are good and bad people among them, like there are Americans and anybody else. But they ain't following God with their heart. Don't let that deceive you. We can think the Jews are some kind of special people. Well, they were in the days of old. They're God's chosen people. And in the Old Testament, Israel was. And God did make covenants with them. And God was a Jew. Jesus Christ, became God in flesh, was a Jew. And the Lord is going to turn back to them. But when you read the New Testament, they forsook him and he forsook them. That's in the Old and New Testament. He turned to the Gentiles. And in the end of time, during the 7-year tribulation, he's going to turn back to the Jews. But the Jews got caught up more about being in their culture, being a Jew, than they did serving God. And that's what kept getting them in trouble. So God turned to the Gentiles. And I'm going to tell you what, the Bible tells us plain in the New Testament that the Gentiles were grafted in. Now we're all of one people. And the Gentile church has done more for God than that Jewish church has ever done. History bears that out, and the Bible. Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles because God's people rejected him. They was more interested in, a lot of them got caught up in just the fact of being in the Jewish culture than serving God. So we got to watch because we can find ourselves doing that. We can get more caught up in the culture of, the culture of living for God than actually loving God. So I encourage us today, let's put our heart into this thing. Let our words mean what they say. Let it not just be emotions. We're singing the songs. Let them come from our heart. We're lifting our voice in praise. Let our heart be attached. Let our soul be into this. Let's have passion and let God not just be a pastime. God bless you today. Have a great day.